looking at my screen. So the current session is all about HL7 and interoperability. So let me start with the definition of HL7. Can anyone tell me like what is HL7? What is the meaning of HL7?
It is a standard called Health Level 7. It basically makes sharing of information interoperable, and it is one of the platforms to exchange information. Makes it easier for sharing information on healthcare platforms.
Okay, so basically it is a standard, and it's a standard mean for interoperability. And the meaning of HL7 is Health Level 7. So where this word comes from is basically it follows a OSI model. So OSI is open source intercommunications model, and it has 7 layers, as you can see on the screen. So this seven layers are basically, it starts from the bottom. The first layer is physical layer, and physical layer is the layer where all the bit level information is exchanged. So yesterday Ved was telling that all the machine level data is represented as 1 or 0. These are all the bits. So this is a physical layer. So everything, so whatever data we are exchanging, that transmission happens in the form of bits, and that happens at the physical layer level. So that has all the media, signals, binary transmission, etc. The layer above it is a data link layer, and data link layer has a physical address basically. So it is a MAC level. So you all know that your laptops have a MAC address, right? So there is a MAC IP address assigned to each and every device. So this is a physical addressing. So data link, at the data link layer, all the data exchange happens in the form of frames. So data frames are exchanged at the MAC level. Then the next level is network level, which is also known as the internet level. So internet level, you have a logical addressing, which has an IP address. So basically, you all know that the general internet, we follow the port 80, and using the port 80, all the data frames are exchanged from one IP address to another. So internet is nothing. Internet is a mesh of all the devices with unique IP addresses. So this is the network level. Then on top of that, we have the transport level. So transport level, basically what happens is, this is the end-to-end connection and the reliability. So this is something like the transport of data, which is happening from one IP address to another IP address. And it is listening to a particular port. One application is listening to a particular port, and the other application is sending the packets at that particular port. So it is the transport layer. So the security, starts at the transport layer. So we have the TLS and, the encryption things at the transport level, or even your, this thing, secure HTTP thing, HTTPS. So basically this is to secure the transport layer. So that, any data packets which are exchanged at the transport layer, they are, foolproof. They are tamper-proof. Nobody can hack those, packets. So when we are talking about different level of securities, transport layer security is, very important. We also need the network level security. So it is the security of all the routers, all the devices which are involved in the network transmission, ensuring that your IP address is not stolen or not hacked. So that is a network level thing. So up to now, all these layers are the communication layers at the networking level. Now the next 3 layers on top of that are all the application layer things, which is in the software. So the 5th layer, is the session layer. So what happens in the session is basically all the, host level communication happens in the session. So whenever we develop a TCP based program, we define a server and we define a client. And this server and clients have the unique IP addresses and the port. So one is sending the packets, the other is listening the packets through the unique ports. So as you discussed yesterday, port is like the gate. So like, for example, we need to deliver a courier to a location. So we should know the address of the location where we need to deliver it. And we have an address from where the packet is coming from. And the courier boy, delivers the packet at the respective location, delivery location. So it is similar to that. So in the session level, we define the locations where the packets are going to be exchanged. And then on top of that, we have the presentation level. So presentation layer, we manage all the encryption things, all the data representation things. And the final layer is the application layer, which is the 7th layer. So application layer is our main, process in the application, where we are doing the application level thing, functions. So why we call HL7, the 7th thing is the 7th layer, which is the application layer. So HL7 works at the application level, but it encompasses all the 6 layers below it. So it's a layered architecture. So one layer above will use the functions provided by the layers below it. So application layer can use all the functions, all the layers, but presentation layer cannot use the application layer because it is on top of that. So any question here, Raghav, anybody?
No, sir.
So this is a bit kind of an engineering thing. I'm trying to tell you here is, whenever we use the word HL7, what is meant by, if somebody asks you what is 7 here, so all you can answer is 7 is the 7th layer in the OSI model, which is the application layer. So all the HL7 related, communication of data happens at this level. One thing more, I want to add here is generally HL7 follows a MLLP protocol. MLLP is a lower level protocol, which is a variant of the TCP/IP protocol. So are you aware of TCP/IP thing?
No, sir.
So TCP/IP, I mean, you all are using the ports and the IP address. You know that you have the IP address and you have the port, right?
Yes, sir.
So TCP is basically the exchange of data packets from one IP and port to another IP and port. So you have a client and you have a server. So TCP protocol is a client-server protocol. And the exchange of data packets happen from the client to the server or vice versa through the IP addresses and the port. Now what happens is one of the major problem in TCP thing is TCP is a continuous transmission of packets. So there is no start or no end. Data packet will keep coming continuously. And it ensures the reliability of the thing, like the data packets are exchanged in the sequence, and TCP ensures that all the packets reach the other side. Nothing is lost in the transmission, but it is a continuous transmission. So the challenge in HL7 is each message, if you see, is like a string delimited text kind of thing. So it has a start and it has an end. So generally what happens is, each HL7 message starts with a MSH segment, header segment, and it ends somewhere. It has a lot of, so it's like a rail, it's like a train. It starts with the engine and that ends, at the last bogie. So somewhere you need to know when a message start and when a message end. But that cannot happen with the TCP/IP because TCP/IP is a continuous flow of packets. There is no start or end. So what HL7 people did is they developed another protocol on top of TCP/IP, which they call as MLLP. And this MLLP, they kind of put a wrapper around the HL7. And this wrapper has a start tag and an end tag. And between the start tag and end tag, you have the entire HL7 message. So these are some ASCII characters basically, which identify this is the start, and there is another ASCII character which identify this is the end. It's a hexadecimal, character. So based on, these start and end tag, we can know that this is one single HL7 message. And, another thing that MLLP does is it works on the acknowledgement model. So whenever the sender application is sending a HL7 message to the receiver, so receiver application identifies the complete message based on the start and end tags using the MLLP thing. And then, once the message has been received, the receiver will send an acknowledgement back to the sender application. So the sender application will not send the another message till the time it has received the acknowledgement. Now acknowledgement, we call it ACK message, acknowledgement message. Maybe I don't have the slide for that. So Raghav, you may note down that maybe. So acknowledgement message are of two types. One is the application level acknowledgement and the other is a commit level acknowledgement. So application acknowledgement is a general acknowledgement. So for example, I am using a Mirth engine and I want to send a ADT message to from application A to application B. Now ADT A04 message, which is the registration message. I want to send a registration message to another application. So one HL7 message is created for ADT A04 and this is sent. So once the other application receives the ADT A04 message, it will generate a acknowledgement that, okay, I have received the message. Now what you have done after receiving the message, you're not bothering about that. So it is just the information that the other application has received the message. So this is the application level acknowledgement. Now again, it can be either a success, which we call as accepting. So either it can accept it can reject it, or there can be an error in the communication. So all these three type of codes come back in the acknowledgement. So if there is a accept acknowledgement returned from the sender, this means message has been submitted successfully. The next message in the queue is sent. If there is a error reject message or there is a network failure message, message could not be, you did not receive the acknowledgement, then there will be a retry mechanism. You will again try to send the message again. And this retry is a kind of a configurable thing. So different Mirth applications, we can configure how many times we want to send that message. 2 times, 3 times. Now, even if it is, failing, then it will stop sending the message. It means the link failure happens. So assuming that there is no link failure, so all the messages will be sent to the other application. They will be received and they will send a application level acknowledgement. Now HL7 body thought that, okay, what happens to these messages? You have received the message, now you have to process the message. And after processing the message, you have to commit the information in your database. So another level of acknowledgement is a commit level acknowledgement, which is more refined. When I say refined, it means application level acknowledgement only tells that I have received the message. Commit level acknowledgement tells me that I have processed the message successfully. So again, there are 3 types. I have successfully processed the message. It is a commit level accept. I have rejected the message during processing due to some, mandatory things were missing. Message was badly constructed. So it is a commit failure, commit reject. Or again, there is some, application is down or something. It was received in the queue, but, application could not process it. Then it is a failure. So these are the 2 different type of acknowledgements. And the purpose of acknowledgement is to ensure that all the messages are sent successfully and processed successfully by the receiver application. So any question on this point? This is a very important part of the HL7 thing. Raghav?
Sir, can you repeat the 3 levels of commit? The 3 types of commit level?
Sure. So basically there are always 3 types. Accept, reject, or failure. Now there are 2 types of acknowledgements which I was telling. So one was the accept level acknowledgement, which only tells that the receiver application has received the message. The other type of acknowledgement is commit level acknowledgement, which tells that application has received the message and has processed the message. So if there is a commit accept, it means the application has received the message, application has processed the message, data has been saved successfully in the database. If there is a reject, it means, application received the message, but, during processing, some bad syntax happened or, some important mandatory element were missing. And when it returned the reject message, it sent the proper error message with it. Okay, this is the failure point where, this message failed. You were supposed to send the patient identifier in the PID2 segment, but, that piece was missing. Patient identifier was missing, so message is badly constructed. So they will reject it. So there will be a commit reject. The failure is a third condition, which is neither success nor reject. It means your application is down. Maybe while processing it, your processing unit itself got down and it could not process it. So these are the 3 type of acknowledgements. I clear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So these are the different product families of HL7 thing.
Is there any kind of a response if it's not received at all?
So it comes in the first category. So as I said, Anaita, like you have the application level acknowledgement. I said there are 3 types. One is accept, one is reject, and one is failure.
Correct.
If the other application could not receive the message at all, then it will wait for a predefined interval of time. And if it did not receive the acknowledgement, it will assume that message has failed somewhere.
Okay.
It will try to resend the message.
Got it.
And as I said, like again, how many times you want to resend the message. This is a configurable parameter. For example, in Mirth, I can configure that I want to send this message 4 times before, I take that it's completely down.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are there. Now, HL7 product family have the different products basically. So I don't want to go in much detail, but I want to show you that, the first things, what I'm talking about, it is the HL7 version 2 product suite. So when I'm saying product suite, it means they have different versions rolled out in, version 2. 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Right now, I think 2.8 or 9 is running. Most of the systems are still at the HL7 2. Some X level maybe. Some has implemented 6, some has implemented 7. So these are the 2 series basically, version 2 series. Now what happens is in the version 2, it is very simple thing. The entire message, I will show you in the other slides. The version 3 is more advanced version and is less commonly used thing. So it is based on the RIM model. I will talk about it. So what they did is they identified that a simple message string is only sending the data. It is not conveying the actual intent of the message. Like for example, there is a mood code. Now, if you have placed an order, what do you want to do with that order? You want to, place that order and you want to execute it after some time, or you want to immediately execute that order? Is that a stat order? Or you want to ensure that only under a particular condition that order should be executed? So that kind of intention is not conveyed with the normal HL7 thing. So then they wanted to capture the mood code. Basically, what is the intention of a particular message? What is the intention of a particular act? So those additional things were added in the RIM model. So RIM model, I can say, is like an information model. So if let us say I have to develop a EMR or EHR, I will simply take the HL7 RIM model. I will develop all the classes based on that. So that will be my complete database thing. So version 3 was primarily XML oriented thing. So instead of string things, they were using XML to process the messages. Then came the CDA architecture. CDA architecture was more the clinical document architecture. So the problem came is in healthcare, you have a lot of clinical documents. You have progress notes, you have discharge summary, you have, a lot of things, lab reports. How you want to send those, documents. So HL7 CDA specification provided the structure, how your clinical documents could be exchanged. So the CDA architecture is very prevalent in US even today. So the continuity of care document, for example, if you have to generate a summary record for the patient, then your document should have a template. It should have the sections. It should have the entries. So all sort of that thing come in the CDA architecture. Then, the latest thing is coming as a FHIR. So FHIR is, what is kind of recommended in the Indian architecture scenario. So FHIR is a blend of all these things. So all the right things were taken from version 2, version 3, CDA, and they defined the FHIR architecture. So I will briefly touch upon, all these product families thing in the sessions. So, yeah, please feel free to ask any question. It's a little bit technical session, I know. So this is the version 2 scenario. You can see on one side, you have two sides of the applications. Both are shown in the violet color. So it has some user interface, some program model, some database. So generally any application has 3 layers, whether you develop it in microservice or you develop it in any architecture pattern, you always have these 3 things. Now, from this application, you want to send the message to another application which is on the top. So in between the layer which is shown in the yellow box is your messaging layer, which is the HL7 thing. So here the scenario is the top side box is shown as the order entry application. And the bottom side box is shown as the laboratory application system, LIS system. So now there is a requirement, let us say, from HIS, I want to send a order message, a lab order message, which is a ORM message to the laboratory for processing. And then on the right side, you can see the laboratory message system will send back the result to the application which sent the order. Yeah. So it is the ORU message. So what happens is on both sides, you can see there are certain components are shown. So one component is for message creation. The other component is shown as the message parsing. So this is a very basic thing I'm talking about. So any HL7 program, you need basically two kind of things. The one kind of program, you need to get the data from the application and create the HL7 message using it. The other, so this is a message creation module. The other kind of, so we call it the HL7 encoding. The other kind of program is, which is receiving the HL7 messages or the acknowledgements and then parsing it. So when I'm saying parsing it, it means that you have a string, a delimited string. There is some character which is, separating the different segments of the string. Mm-hmm. And then you are breaking down, the information which is coming in the string into different variables and storing them in the database. So that is called, either we call it a message parsing or we call it message decoding. So any HL7 application is primarily has to have these two things. Now in between you have the actual conduit, which is responsible for transmission of message. So it can be used for exchanging the message, receiving the acknowledgement, storing the message in some temporary database till the time your message flow completes, and a lot of other things. So we need a middleware or a connector for that. So generally, we have a lot of middlewares available to use there. So Mirth is a very common prevalent engine which we use here. So Mirth open source engine, we can use to send or receive the messages. So we don't need to program that thing. So that middleware is already available. We only need to program the message creation and the message parsing part. And then one more common problem comes is, whatever master data is coming in the HL7 thing, as I said in the morning, that your data has different meanings in the different thing. Your code directories are not same. So whenever two applications are sending the data, so for example, I have a HIS application, I want to send it to Attune LIS or any LIS. So I need to understand what the master data they are storing. And based on that, I need to do the mapping tables. And this mapping has to be done in the runtime. When I'm kind of creating the HL7 message, that time I will be transforming the message and using all the lookups. So that is the current scenario. And this is the point-to-point integration which is happening. So any application I want to send the HL7 message, I first need to understand what master table they are maintaining. And that is why, we need the code directories and all MDDS things. Any question here? So this is the limitation. So currently, because of this point-to-point mapping thing, even in a single application, you have a lot of modules. You have lab, you have pharmacy, you have order entry, ADT, radiology, etc., etc. And if they are talking to each other, you need so many point-to-point things. So it become a completely, kind of hodgepodge thing, haphazard. So what is the advantage of using HL7 here is, if we follow the standard HL7 thing, so I mean HL7 comes with a standard code directories itself, which generally are based on, the HL7 body has defined the standard tables for the HL7. Now the latest FHIR, it is using the SNOMED for the value sets. So if you are following one single standard across the applications, so instead of point-to-point thing, all the other applications need to map it to one particular standard. So for example, in the current scenario, all the n number of applications will be conforming to FHIR, which is a single standard, and FHIR will be understood by all the partners, all the partner applications. So instead of doing the point-to-point application mapping, they will be only doing the mapping to FHIR once at a time, and then they will be able to interoperate with each other. So basically, if you see the right-hand side thing, HL7 or FHIR will be a single messaging standard across the application. So it will become a hub of all the spokes. If you are not using this standard, then the left-hand side thing will happen. You will do so many point-to-point integrations, which is very difficult to maintain. Now, I want to speak a little bit about the HL7 types. So we are using different words here. So we are using ADT. So ADT is basically admission, discharge, and transfer. So we have around 54 or more than that. The exact number I've forgotten. So we have so many HL7 messages in the ADT category. But the primary ones are A01, ADT A01, which is for admission. ADT A02, which is for transfer. A03 for discharge. A04 for registration of outpatient. A08 for update. A07 is for conversion of inpatient to outpatient. So these are the prime functionalities which are used in any HIS system. So if we are building a GP system, for example, we need sort of these kind of functionalities. We don't need all the 58 HL7 things in the ADT. So ADT is admission, discharge, transfer. Similarly, on the lab order and result side, we have a ORM message for lab order and ORU for the result. Similarly, for the pharmacy side, we have a ORM for pharmacy order and ORU for pharmacy result. So on, basically. So we have, a lot of different things. So same way we have, SIU messages for, we call it insurance related things. Then we have MDM messages for master data management things. So a lot of other stuff are there. Each message, if you can see, is a delimited string. So it's something like that, okay, you have a string which has multiple parts. So each part we call as a segment. The first segment of the message is always a header. Generally, it's like a engine of the train. And this MSH, we call it MSH. Now, MSH is the message header, and this contains all the information related to what is this message type, who is the sender, who is the receiver, what is the date and time when message was created, what is the type of acknowledgement which is, coming back. So that again will come in the MSH, whether it's an application level acknowledgement or it's a commit level acknowledgement, which I was talking about. That will come in the MSH thing. MSH is a mandatory segment in the HL7 thing. So without that, your message will not be processed. Now, if you see this particular diagram, you have three kind of things here. So one are the simple, MSH, EVN, PID, these kind of things are mentioned. Some things are shown in the square bracket and some things are shown in square bracket and a curly brace. Can you see that? So something which is in the square bracket means optional. So for example, in the message you want to send PV1. PV1 is a segment where you are sending the visit related information. PID is the patient information. PV1 is the visit information. Now you have two types. One is a main segment where you need to store the visit information, like this is the episode number, this is the encounter number, etc. The other one is the PV2, which is the additional information. But this is something very rarely used. I mean, if you want to send more additional information in related to visit, you can use PV2. Otherwise, it is optional. So HL7 shows it as a square bracket thing. Now, similarly, there is a guarantor thing. Now, guarantor thing is a square bracket. It means it is optional. And within the square bracket, you have a curly brace. It means it can be multiple also. I mean, the cardinality is many. So either you will have nothing or you can have many guarantors. So you can have 0 to many. This is the kind of cardinality. So basically each HL7 thing, you can see there is a specification available on internet. Each message type, you can see what are the segments required. It will always start with MSH. Then it will show you what all segments are compulsory. So these will be shown in the plain thing here. No square bracket, nothing. So all these things are mandatory. If something you can see as a square bracket, you mean it's optional. And something you see the square bracket and curly brace, so it is optional but repeated. You can use multiple things of that. And one more thing I want to point here is, if you find anything in the HL7 which is not part of the standard HL7 thing, you can send it as a customized segment. And we call it Z segments. So either you can create the entire new segment which is not there in the standard HL7 thing, and we can call it a completely Z segment thing. So let us say there are two hospitals. Now they want to send a specific information about some more detailed information about the radiology report, which is not available in the standard specification. So what they will do is they will agree upon with each other. Okay, I want to send you these additional fields and you process these additional fields, and they will send that information as the Z segment. they will create whatever their new segment and call it Z, for example, Z radiology segment, something. And this will be always at the end of the standard message. And there can be multiple Z segments. It is also possible that you can include one or two new fields in the existing segments. For example, in the PID segment, I want to send patient FIR information. Now, patient FIR information is not available in standard HL7 thing. But if in Indian context, you want to send the MLC number or, whatever, if there is a medical legal case, so you can create an additional field in the PID segment. And this will be a Z field. So we call them extensions. And because of these extensions, so these extensions are both good and bad. So even if you see our e-object structure, we are saying three things. We are saying that our e-object will have a header, then standard segments, and then optional segments, custom segments. So this concept is being taken from the standard HL7 thing. So header is our MSH like of thing. So whenever we are sending the e-claim, we have a e-claim header. The detail is our rest of the segments. Now within the detail, whatever comes as part of the FIRE standard, you can assume it like the part of the standard message. Whatever you want to create the new fields, these all are the extensions, which are similar to Z fields or Z segments. So nothing is changed. So very concept is same, whether you follow the version 2, version 3, version 4 or FIRE, the concept is same. Yeah, any question here? Now HL7 specification also tells you in detail each segment what it will look like. So in terms of, it will tell you the sequence, it will tell you the length of the field, it will tell you the data type of the field, optionality for the field, whether this is optional or this is required, this is repeatability, it can occur multiple times, or what are the code table information, what are the item number information, etc. Now, if you ask me frankly, like how to implement the MDDS thing, so we can simply implement the MDDS using the HL7 also. Now, what you need is, you need the length of the field should be based on the MDDS data element size. The required or optionality can be decided by the application. MDDS is not constraining that. Data type of the field will come from the MDDS again. Then table number for codes will be your code directory number. So that means if there is a particular element which require the values from a particular code directory or a value set, like the gender code require M, F or T. So we have to define a specific code table number there, which all other applications have to follow. So basically they can take the data from the standard code directories, they can load it in their master tables, and they can use it to populate the values to those fields basically. So ultimately, this is a concrete implementation of the MDDS thing that we are talking about. Raghav, any question?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. So same way we have the PID for the patient information, and we have a lot of other segments. So version 2 is kind of if health industry had followed HL7 version 2 also, it would have been much better. But the unfortunate thing is, even HL7 version 2 implementation is also very poor in the country. And whoever is implementing the HL7, they are implementing it in their own way, whatever they can think of. They are not following the standard MLLP thing. They are not following the standard tables, which are coming with the HL7, or length or size or type. They are not following exactly. That is why they are only doing the structural interoperability using HL7. But they are not following the semantic interoperability part using the HL7. So they are not leveraging that properly. Now, HL7 version 3, I will briefly touch upon because this is not very frequent. It was developed as a good standard thing, but then it was very complex to implement. So implementation could not happen at that scale. So these were the different people who were responsible for HL7 version 3. Vas Rizal was the vision person. Tad Klein was like me, so he was part of defining all the standards thing. Then somebody did tooling, somebody did modeling, somebody did methodology, etc. So these are the people. So the main concept of version 3 is basically RIM, which is the reference information model, and then a set of vocabulary and a standard, methodology. So what was the objective of using version 3 was they realized that HL7 is still used only for interoperability purpose, but can we use to develop the information model of an application? So in UK, there was one organization who was developing the EHR archetypes. That was designed to exchange all the data sets from one application to other. And our EHR standards also recommend to follow the EHR archetype model. Although I strongly, wonder whether, anybody really knows what is archetype. So they are recommending EN 13606 model for defining the record structures. Then version 3 also they were trying to do the same thing. So they developed all these classes in the reference information model, and they suggested all the information designers to use these classes to model the EHR applications. So whatever tables they wanted to develop for patient, whatever table you want to develop, order whatever table you want to develop, use these classes. So that was a kind of approach. And basically, these are the different information models which come with the version 3. Standard HL7 version 3 provide a reference information model. We call it RIM. Then, if let us say I'm developing an application for NHA using version 3. So for that particular domain, I can derive the information model from the standard. So I can collect all the data which is required for claim. I can take that information from the reference model. So it will become a derived domain message information model. I call it DIM. Now I want to further refine it. I want to restrict it that, okay, all the value sets which are coming in the message should not be coming from international SNOMED. I have to provide a code directory for NHA. So I'm kind of limiting all the values in the value sets. And this is exactly what you are doing. So this will be a restricted model. We call it RIM, RMIM, which is a refined message model. And then finally, we are kind of providing these Excel sheets to the NHA team. So Priyanka and myself, we are working on defining all the fire mapping things. You all are working on that. So this is the final hierarchical message definition, which is the HMD. So ultimately, the work that we are doing in the fire is we are kind of, using all these 4 models in that. So I will not, use much on that. So basically, this is how a standard development cycle they recommend. That first thing is we have to define all the use cases. Then based on the use cases, we need to identify all the interactions, like how many messages are required, what are the interaction points, and then what are the different application roles and what are the events that will trigger the messages. And this is on the domain side. And on the technology side, we will identify all the messages. What are the different messages that need to be sent? Like for example, in the e-claim, we need a e-claim object, we need a e-payment, we need a e-claim response. So all these message types should be identified, and we have to define the profile structure of each message, which is the HMD we are doing. These are few of the core classes of the RIM model, I will briefly touch upon. So basically there are 4 or 5 types of classes in the HL7 version 1. And why I'm covering this topic is because fire directly comes from here. So one is the entity class. So entity class is anything which is physical. So any noun you're using is a entity. Person is an entity. Organization is an entity. So whoever is a physical, tangible thing in the entire use case, we can assume it as an entity. So these are all living subjects. These are all organizations, all materials, all places, etc. So first we need to identify all the entities. Then, each entity basically is doing something. So this doing something is represented by an act class. So for example, a doctor places order. A nurse also places order, for example. Or a nurse, provide the, dressing care to the patient. Or a health worker collects the screening data. So health worker is an entity and collecting screening data is a act. So whatever acts are done by the respective entities, those are represented by the act classes. So it includes all the, orders, plans, events, etc. And there is a relationship between entity and the act. So one single entity can do multiple acts. One act can be done by multiple entities. So it is a many-to-many relationship. Similarly, there comes a third class, which is the role. Now, it is possible that the same entity can have different roles to perform a particular act. So, for example, there is a doctor. He performed the surgery. So, doctor is an entity. Performing surgery is an act. So, when he is performing surgery, his role is surgeon. But after surgery, the patient is shifted to ICU, and the same doctor is coming, to evaluate the patient condition. That time, the act becomes the evaluation of the patient condition, and his role changes actually. So he's not doing the surgery every day. I mean, morning is coming, evening is coming. So he's not doing the surgery. He's evaluating the condition. So each entity can have multiple roles in which it is performing the act. So role class is there. Then, participation. So as I said that, in a particular role, how it is participating in that act, that participation thing changes. So I have already covered this example. Like if it is doing the surgery, then performing surgery is the participation. If it is only consulting, consultation is a participation. So with each role, there is a participation thing involved. Now it is also possible that, there can be several acts together. There can be a predecessor and a successor act. There can be a cause and outcome act. Or there can be a collector or component act. So for example, if something happens to a patient, so for example, if patient condition is improved, doctor will ask for the discharge of the patient. So the act discharge will depend on the stable condition of the patient. So stabilizing the condition, it has a lot of acts involved in that. Nurse is coming daily, doing the dressing, all the medications are given, and doctors are visiting. So all these acts are performed. So the ultimate linkage is to the discharge, depending on the patient condition. So different acts can have a cause and effect relationship, or kind of outcome based relationship, or something happens in the project plan kind of thing. So one task will happen only when the first task has been completed. So predecessor, successor act. So all that relationships are defined in the act relationship class. And the final thing is the role link. So it is also possible that, two different entities can interact with each other in different roles. So for example, the relation between doctor and patient, and the relation between doctor and the caregiver. These are two different things. The same doctor, when he will meet the family person of the patient, he will advise them on certain things to do with the patient and all. But when he is interacting with the patient, he will be directly doing the care to the patient. So there can be different associations between the two roles. So fundamentally, these are the main classes of the RIM model, which is entity, role, participation, act and relationship, and rolling. So all the other things, whatever scenarios we are capturing in the HL7 version 3, it is based on these classes and some additional classes. Yeah, any question here? Admiti, Raghav? So you may read it, and I will share this slide. And if you have any more questions, we can have another session also. Don't worry.
Yes, sir. So, sir, do you also have any detailed document also for us?
Yes, I will share this document, and any additional support document you need, I will refer you the links on the internet.
Okay.
A lot of
sure, thank you, sir.
So ultimately what happens is, so whenever we are developing any HL7 message, we first develop a schema. So this schema is similar to what I was showing in the morning to the MDDS element thing. So all the HL7 version 3 messages are machine readable thing. So there is a fundamental thing we need to take here is, one is a machine readable, the other is a human readable. So every machine readable document may not be human readable thing. So if you are looking at this document, what you are understanding out of that? So this is a message actually. This is a message which is based on the schema. So each message has a schema. So first you define the schema or the structure of the message, and based on the structure, you are defining the actual message. If I give this message to anyone to read, you need a lot of technical knowledge and patience to understand it. But machine, what we will do, we will write the code in the machine. It will actually process it and it will understand what is what. So it will understand this is the status code, this is the effective time, the subject is this, the type is this, and so on. So similarly, our e-objects are primarily meant for machine readable. So it is a JSON thing. Ultimately, what will happen is in the payload, it will go like an encrypted format because of the data security thing. So whatever JSON you can see on the Excel sheet that we are doing, it is till the time you are modeling it. Once the actual message will come, it will be encrypted. Human beings will not read it, but machine will kind of decrypt it and process it based on the FHIR specifications that will be developed. So these are the machine readable things. But there are the human readable documents also, which are kind of digital documents. For example, any PDF, any scanned PDF, or any kind of clinical note, any lab report, which is like in a PDF format or CSV file, which you can click open and you can read that. So this is a human readable thing. So you have to be very clear. Some documents may be human readable and machine readable both. Some document may be machine readable but not human readable. And some document will only be human readable. So these are the three categories of the electronic documents that we generate. So from the document standpoint now, what the HL7 body felt is, till the time we were only talking about messages. So we had different type of messages. Messages were generated by different events. So fine. So it is all the reactive mode. Something will happen, then some message will generate. Something will happen, then some message will generate. Someone will generate it, someone will receive it, and they will process it and they will kind of handle the message. So it was a request and response mechanism. But what they felt is that during the entire care event of the patient, a lot of documents are generated. You have discharge summary, you have lab reports, and you have clinical notes, progress notes, sort of thing. And HL7 messages, both version 2, version 3, were not sufficient to model the documents per se. So if I give you a discharge summary document, PDF, and somebody asks you the task that, okay, convert it into a machine readable format, then it was not that straightforward. You cannot use the HL7 version 2, version 3 like that. So we needed another kind of standard. So US, there was a third body, came out of the HL7 and they developed the clinical document architecture. So clinical document architecture was a document markup standard which defined the structure and the semantics of the clinical documents for the purpose of exchange. So clearly they mentioned that whenever you want to exchange the information, the clinical documents, please use the CD architecture. Now, when we are talking about PHR in our country, so one of the prime requirement is all the clinical document as much as possible should be converted in a standard format rather than normal PDF, scanned files, OCR, images, those things. And this standard format in the country is being recommended as the e-objects. So we have the provider side e-objects and the payer side e-objects. And that is FHIR based because FHIR is most advanced version out of all these HL7 thing. So FHIR is also HL7. So each clinical document, there were certain aspects we need to consider. One is how the document will be persisted, who will be the owner of that document, who will maintain these documents, who will be so how will you ensure the privacy and security of the documents when exchanged? How will it define the total context in which the document is shared, the completeness and the human readability part. So these are the different aspects. So CD architecture handle all these aspects. So even in our e-object thing, all these points come in importance. When we are saying e-object, we should define the mechanism of persisting those e-objects somewhere. These e-objects will have the stewardship issues. Who will own these e-objects? How will you ensure that if some legal issue come on the structure of e-object, like the data in the e-object, who will be liable for that? So of course, the source will be responsible for that. Then how will you ensure the privacy and security of the e-objects? So if you are talking about health data fiduciaries, they will be primarily custodian. They will be maintaining all the repositories for these e-objects, because ultimately provider systems do not have the bandwidth to handle the consent and those things directly at the source. So some organization has to handle those things. So, SDAF architecture or the health data fiduciary model will be doing that. PHR will be doing that. Then they will be taking care of all the security, privacy, consent, authentication. They will be ensuring the tamper-proofness of the document. Nothing is changed when data was exchanged in between. And some of the document, for example, the old legacy document, still we cannot ensure that you will convert everything in the e-object. So till the time that happens, the old object will still keep coming as the PDFs or the OCR files and those. So those will be only used for human readable purpose. You cannot use them in the analytics. If something you have scanned as a PDF, you cannot derive the data out of that. So like so CD architecture talks about a header. Now header, they talk about certain attributes like ID. You need a document ID. You need a particular code which identified the kind of document. You need the title of the document. You need the effective time when the document was generated. And some additional things. It includes the consent also. So if you see the e-object structure today, what Priyanka has done, it has a header section. And most of the header section has kind of this information, more or less. So only thing we need to include is, in all the provider objects, we need to include the placeholder for consent, which is not yet there. So consent thing, because all the e-objects when you are exchanging even to the NHA or to any authority, it should be implied by the consent of the patient. So one consent document is required. And then within the detail part of the document, you have all the entities. So as I said, you require different entities, acts and, roles, etc., etc. So all that define the sections of the document. So ultimately, this is the detail part of our e-objects. So normally when you read a document, what happens? You have the different chapters in the document. So similar way, the clinical document architecture, you have the sections. And within the sections, you have the entries. So this is the logical grouping of the relevant information. So for example, all the patient demographic related thing is one section. Similarly, all the diagnosis related thing is one section. So you divide the whole document into different sections. So ultimately what I'm trying to say here is, if we are modeling a discharge summary, or if we are modeling even a claim in the FHIR, never one single resource you can model the entire thing. You need a lot of resources together. So it's like a document rather than a message. Rather than saying it like an e-object message, it is an e-object document. And like an e-object document, you have different sections in that. So you need to bundle those sections. So it is a bundled resource. So when we are defining the bundle, you need to have the sections and the entries. So some of you can have a look at my sample JSON, what I have defined. So this is exactly the same thing. It's not a normal JSON. It's a document which is modeled based on the FHIR standard. So whatever we are doing in the e-object is primarily coming its origin from the CDA architecture. So these are the different classes which are shown. Clinical document has many sections has the entries. Then within that you can have different classes, observation, encounter, procedure, etc. Any questions till now? I think it's getting very technical, huh? Raghav?
Little bit technical.
One of the important exercises that we are currently doing is the specification profiling. So right now, whatever e-objects we are defining for NHA in the IT Standard Committee, we are doing the profiling thing. We are developing a profile for NHA e-claim object. There can be several profiles of the similar things. So for example, today NHA requires certain things. tomorrow IRDA will require more sections in the e-claim. So the message type will be same, the document type will be same e-claim, but there will be a different profile which will be designed for IRDA with more sections. But NHA only require the package level information, so it may not require all the things, all the detail, bill level thing. So what I'm trying to say is, before any message is developed or any document is developed, we need to do the profiling exercise, which currently we are doing. And under the profile, we define the structure of the message, all the segments, within the segments, all the fields, then the fields which require the terminologies, where these terminologies will come from. So you are already providing the code directories. So all those things is part of the message definition. So terminology binding, if you read the FHIR thing, so why I'm using the FHIR word is because we are not using version 3, we are using FHIR. So I'm directly giving the example from FHIR. So if you read the specification, there are uses of the words like shall, should, may, etc. If something is written as a shall, that means it has to have a value. You cannot keep it null. Although in certain cases you may use a null flavor or unknown value or other or something like that, but it has to have a value. If you forget to populate that thing, your message will be rejected by the validator. So if a FHIR, first component is a FHIR validator, which kind of validates all the messages. So if something is mandatory and I'm kind of leaving that field blank, and if I send this API, a message through the API to the other side, the validator will reject it. And ultimately something acknowledgement will come back to me, like the application acknowledgement I was talking about, commit level acknowledgement. It will tell the real error code. Okay, this is a failure. So the responsibility of this validation will be primarily with the SCP thing. It should be with the health claim platform thing in the NHS scenario. They should be validating all the messages and they should be sending the application level at the commit level acknowledgements if there is something wrong with the structure of the message. So static binding means the allowed values of the value set never changes. These are constant. Dynamic binding means the allowed values can be changed over the period of time. Maybe it can be expanded. So like in the code directory, there will be certain things which will never change. For example, blood group. So far, so long, we have only 8 types of blood groups. O positive, O negative, A positive, A negative, etc. It will not change easily. So this is a constant static binding example. But dynamic binding can be anything. For example, your district LRC code table, states keep changing their boundaries. They keep reorganizing, creating new districts, merging the districts, etc. So it's a dynamic thing. So your code directories are divided in 2 types. One which can change over the time or which will remain constant. So those have to be clearly specified in the value set definitions. So ultimately, this is nothing new. This is again the MDDS structure, if you can see. And this is the crux of the terminology server that we are talking about. So in the terminology server, we have to define the terminology bindings, which is actually like what code system will be required. For example, SNOMED terminology will come under the SNOMED code system. ICD codes will come under ICD code system, etc. Now, ICD code system again can be ICD 10, ICD 11. And then under the code system, what are the different terms or the codes? And if there is any value set required for that, what are those value sets? And one more thing is required is in the terminology server, we need the mappings. If we have different coexisting terminologies, we need the mappings between the terminologies. So if let us say we have the ICD 10 and NHS mandates that ICD 11 has to be used. So we have to kind of keep the mapping for both ICD 10 as well as 11. And there should be a mapping file available in the terminology server, which in the runtime is doing the translation between 10 and 11. So that is the job of terminology server. And terminology server is a very important essential component of HL7 or FHIR related interoperability. So we cannot miss it out. So I think this piece you're already doing. So when you're writing the FHIR thing, if you can see the tables, the Excel sheets, you are defining the cardinality. Something is 0 something is, 1 to many, something is 0 to many. 0 to many means it is not mandatory. You can have a missing thing. But if something is 1, it means at least 1 is required. If something is only 1, you mean you cannot have more than 1. But if something is 1 to many, you can have minimum 1, but maximum many. Any you mean. And then you are also defining the terminology. So you are telling that if it is a gender code, your values are coming from code system. So in the current scenario, the code system is NHA code directories. So you will first give a namespace like nhA.gov.in/fire/value-set/gender code. So this namespace, you will be creating one table and you will be defining all the codes for the gender code there. So ultimately, when the fire, E object will go to the SCP platform, they will validate the gender code is getting a right value from this value set. If someone is not using the values from this value set and using something else, they will reject the message and they will send an acknowledgement back to the application that your message has been failed. So this is another task, that we have to do for IT standards committee team. Any question here? Raghav?
No, sir.
So these are the different document types. We have a discharge summary, we have a diagnostic. Now there are multiple ways of implementing it. So specification is a standard, but there are various ways of implementing the standards. So one way is fire-based resources, which is a very easy way. The other is the OMOP structure, which is a something called common data model. Now I have heard in parallel, some organizations are using OMOP as the end schema for the record formats. So again, we have to do the translations between the fire and the OMOP, if that is going to be. So basically this OMOP is nothing. It is again sort of a CDA standard to define the document types. Like this is my discharge summary, this is my consultation note, etc. And we are also defining the same thing in the E object. So we have a E object for discharge summary, we have a E object for, so we need a E object for all these things basically. The final thing comes with the fire, because this is what our NDHP report has recommended. And as you see that this is a HL7 specification itself. It is the same body of HL7 International, US International, which has developed this standard. The definition of fire is fast, health, interoperable resources, and it combines the best features of all the three things what we discussed right now: version 2, version 3, CDA. So it is not as complex as version 3. And it removed a lot of lacuna which exist in the version 2 thing. And we are able to model the documents using fire, which we cannot do with just version 2. So if we are not using fire, then only option left are OMOP or archetypes. Both are much, much complex than fire. So this is the argument if people ask why fire should be used. Out of all the standards available to model the documents, clinical documents, fire is the easiest one. And we are modeling all our E-objects using fire. Now fire, again, we have different releases. Before that, I want to use, tell you about the terminology. So we have a terminology called DSTU, STU, and normative. And maybe you can note down that. So DSTU is basically draft standard for trial use, DSTU. So whenever any fire resource definition is done internationally, they circulate it for the consultation among the people. So that is the draft mode. So they generally use the word draft standard for trial use. So people are allowed to use it, but it is kind of volatile. It can change. A lot of things can change. It's not a stable version. Because it's for consultation. So based on the suggestions and feedback, they will change the fire structures. So some of the releases can be in the DSTU mode, some of the resources basically. So that means their definition can change over the time. Then we have the STU, which is a standard for trial use. So once the draft part is over, consultation part is over, and kind of all the draft comments have been included in that, it is a standard for trial use. Still, it is a trial use standard. It's not stable. So currently, if you see the FHIR 4, the release 4, which NDHP talks about, it is and the third one is the normative. Before I go to the normative is the stable form. Now, once anything has become normative, it is not going to change. This is kind of sacrosanct now. So if you ask release 4, till now only patient and observation resources out of 143 resources, only patient and observation resources are normative standards. So what it means, the others are still STU. And when I say STU, it means whatever definitions we are using now to model the E-objects, there may be major or minor changes in that. It is not yet stable. That is one challenge or maybe kind of risk associated in that. The other kind of risk is basically we cannot use all the 143 resources per se, frankly speaking. So we have to do an exercise. We have to kind of identify the relevant resources which are required for Indian context. So patient is one, observation is one, then imaging study is one, media is one, because you need the DICOM image files also. So nobody talks about that. And DHP is totally silent on this. So we need to consider all the relevant resources. And the third thing we need to understand is we cannot adopt the standard FHIR resource as it is. So then we have two options here. One option is we make an Indian version of the resources which are relevant to Indian scenario. Like for example, patient resource. If you want to use patient FHIR resource for PHI, which Sunil Bhushan is doing actually. So he's trying to use the FHIR patient resource to define all the patient health information identifier things. So there are two ways. If everything what we need for Indian scenario, all the patient demographic set, if that is kind of, we can use the FHIR standard, international standard as it is well and good. But generally it doesn't happen. There are a lot of fields which are specific to Indian requirement only. They were never provided in the international US context. Or else, whatever value sets are recommended in the standard international are based on international SNOMED things. Now, in our code directories, we have the different recommendation. So, international standard of thing, they may say male, female or something else. But in our context, we have clearly said that MFT should be used for gender code. So, anyway, we have to change the value sets based on our scenario. So, what we need is we need to define the Indian version of all these resources, which we are doing for the NHE for the time being. And now there are two ways. One is either we get the approval for all these resources from the HL7 body, or else we take the responsibility of maintaining and managing it at our level, at the India level. So some authority or some organization has to come up who take the authority of maintaining those profiles which are India specific versions. So right now NRC or somebody can be asked, who will take the responsibilities? Let us say we extend something to the Indian requirement. Now, the international HL7 body will not take the responsibility of that profile unless until, we get approval from them, but that's a very long process. So then some organization at the India side has to own those resources and kind of publish the changes or any version management related to those resources in future. So that is one point from a governance standpoint we need to take care. So these were three gentlemen who developed the FHIR thing. So one of that gentleman came in our BMG of office, who is in the mid, is the Graham Grieve. The rest two are Lloyd McKenzie and Ewout Kramer. These three people were responsible for developing the FHIR. So FHIR, everything is the resource basically. So as I showed you the core classes in the version 3, they actually use the word resource. So the basic fundamental unit of FHIR is resource. So if you tell to any common person that what FHIR is a collection of 143 resources. Now, if I want to model any document using these resources, for example, our discharge summary. So first I need to understand, like, okay, if my discharge summary is a PDF, what are the different sections of that? Now within the sections, I have a patient demographic, I have the history, I have the observations, I have the orders, results, blah, blah thing. Then within the sections, what are the entries? And based on that, I need to identify the respective resources from the FHIR list of resources. And we need to model it as a FHIR document, which is a bundled resource. So all these different resources will be combined together as the entries in that bundle. So please remember, discharge summary is not a single FHIR resource. It's a bundled resource. So when we are submitting it to the REST API, so another thing what FHIR says is all the communication of message payload will happen through RESTful APIs. So if you see the RESTful API, JSON is the preferred way of sending the data, but then FHIR does not stop you using other things. JSON, they say that you can use JSON, you can use XML, you can use Turtle or linked JSON, which is actually the RDF format. So format wise, it is not compulsory for me to use only JSON, because we generally tell the people that, okay, we will use a JSON because JSON is the easier one. It's a lightweighted thing. The other thing so we have to follow the RESTful principles in sending and receiving FHIR. And I think we will cover this RESTful thing, when we will be doing the API based session. So it's a client server thing, and everything in the REST is basically a resource and a representation. And we have the verbs. So we are sending a GET, we have a post, we have a put, we have a delete. So different verbs are there. And we have a URL, basically, a specific URL for each and everything, each and every action. So FHIR resources are sent and received using RESTful APIs, and all these resources are required. But please remember, JSON is not the only way of sending the FHIR. I can send it as a XML also. I can send it using a RDF format also. Now, one question comes, let us say, and this is happening actually when we are doing the modeling for the E-objects. If there is some field which is required only for Indian context, like, as I said, patient MLC number, or like, for example, wallet amount. I remember this particular thing, like NHA want the wallet amount as a field. Now, wallet amount, if you see the standard international FHIR resource, there is no field called wallet amount. So what you will do? You will include all these kind of additional fields as the extensions. So as I said, earlier, like in the HL7 version 2, you will have the JED segments and the JED fields. So whatever was not part of the standard and you wanted to include in the message, custom things, those were JED segments. Similar way, in the FHIR, everything which is not part of the standard resource, this is an extension. But if it is an extension, then you are responsible for sending the definition of that thing. So generally what happens is, right now we are only modeling the structure of the E-object for NHA. But going forward, when it will come as a full-scale project, we have to do the proper profiling of that. So when I'm saying profiling, there is a structure definition resource for each and every element. So in E-object, we are using the group of elements actually, right? So each element we are mapping with the FHIR. So like patient ID, patient mobile number, etc. So each element, there are the structure definition resources available which define the structure of that element. Field, what this field is, what type is, what size is, etc. So most of the time, the standard structure definitions available with the FHIR standard is sufficient because we are not changing anything in that primarily. But if we are creating a new extension element, like the example I gave, the wallet amount or so we will be responsible for providing the structure definition resource files for these kind of fields, because these will not be available in the standard FHIR public server. So if somebody want to test their FHIR object with a standard public server available, so a lot of public servers are available to test the FHIR, but they will be only testing the standard part. They will not be testing the extensions basically, which we are generating. So we have to internally manage the definitions of those, schema of those. So any resource has three parts actually. It has an extension part, it has a narrative part, and it has a defined structured data. So defined structured data is, all you guys are doing in the analyst team. So you are doing the MDDS mapping. This is all the structure definition part you are doing. Narrative part is primarily for those cases where, let us say, AND system does not have the capability to process the FHIR. Then we can include one div section in the FHIR resource, which contain the human readable section basically. So it can render as a HTML file. So if they cannot read the entire message, then they can read it through the screen itself. So this is for those payers, for example, who do not have the FHIR processing capability, or maybe in the beginning, they will not have. So they can read the entire message on their web browser. And the extensions, as I said, all the NHA related additional feeds which are not part of standard, these need to be coming in the extension. So this is the example. And you can see this particular example is not JSON based. You can see the first line of the thing, it is XML, namespace is defined. So it is XML based. Now it's a matter of choice. So if NHA says, okay, we are using XML for all the other things, we want to use this also as XML, we have no problem at all. Nothing will change in our mapping. So first, we are showing the extension here. So for example, this consent trial something as example, they are showing as a extension. Then the text part is actually the human readable section basically. And then rest of the thing is the standard segment. Any questions, anybody? And please don't make it such a boring session. I am only talking. Raghav,
No. So we're trying to understand.
Everybody trying to figure out whether why did we join Digital Help?
No, sir.
I can't say like that. I'm not kind of making people so bored. But I understand this is not a single session, will not help the thing. But I'm setting the context right. And maybe we need more detailed discussions on that.
Yeah.
At least people need to be aware of this. When we are talking about FHIR, we are talking these things to the rest of the world. We need to be internally understand what are the things. And this cannot be done in 1 hour session, definitely.
After these 2-week sessions, there is a test and it will be on the e-objects, okay?
So everyone has to pass this. So these are all the different resource catalogs. So if you ask me, basically, I need to model a EMR or EHR system, EMR system basically. So I can take the entire FHIR resource thing and I can develop the complete information model using it. This is pretty standard. The only thing, what I'm requesting is we need to kind of identify the right set of resources which are relevant for India. All the resources may not be relevant. Like care plan, we are not yet using. Maybe we will use it in future. And even the medication side, we are using only medication request, for example. So we have to identify the right resources. We need to map it to the Indian requirements. So we need to make a Indian version. And then we have to ask someone like NRCS to host all the Indian versions of the FHIR profiles. This is the minimum we can do. So if you open the FHIR website, you something see like that. So on the top tabs, you have different tabs here: UML, XML, JSON, Turtle, R3, etc. These are different representations actually. Our case for NHA, we are using JSON format, so we can kind of click any of the representation. You can view the same thing in different formats. Then it shows you each resource structure, like, okay, this is a feed. These are the kind of cardinality. Something is 0 to many, something is 1 to many. So if something is 1 to many, I said minimum 1 is required. Many can also be there. Something is 1 to 1, only 1 is required. something is zero too many, that means even if it is not there, your fire message is okay. Then the type side, it is showing all the data types. So actually, these all data types are defined by the fire and the HL7 data types. Now within that, there are two types basically. So one are the standard data types. The others are the references basically. So for example, I have a discharge summary, and in the discharge summary, I need the patient. Now ideally, fire is handled in two ways. So if I am developing fire for the provider space, so ideally I have already sent the patient information when patient was registered. And when I'm sending the discharge summary, the fire server of the other side already has the information for that patient available. Or maybe I can say like this fire resource is available as a document. So here we can use any NoSQL database also. So MongoDB, for example, the complete JSON document I can store in the MongoDB. So what happens if I have already sent the patient resource and now I am sending the discharge summary? So do I need to send the complete patient information again? So not required. I will only send the reference link of that original document which I sent. So what Fire will do? Fire will search the server itself to find the resource based on that URL. If this exists or not. If it doesn't exist, then it will send the error. Otherwise, it will use the information from there. But let us take the other scenario. Now, the other scenario is NHA related thing. Now, we are saying SCP. SCP is doing all the routing and then, it is sending to the payer. So, first time we send the claim. So payers are not required to register the patient, So, registration of patient is a provider event, provider side event. So, we send the complete information of the patient along with the claim itself. So whatever mandatory attributes they need related to patient, we send it as part of the claim. So we call them as the contained resources. So these resources are not actually sent before or after something. This is sent as part of the main object itself. We call them contained resource. So when we are submitting something as a contained resource, the complete information of the resource is contained in the same document. So Fire will find the same document to get the information, not elsewhere. If it is missing there, then it will, send the error. Otherwise, it will find the complete. So patient-related complete information will get in the patient resource. Similarly, observation-related thing will come in the observation. Diagnosis-related thing will come in the diagnosis. So on. Or payer-related information will come in the payer organization. So this everything is part. So all the reference links in this document, in our e-claim scenario, you can consider this to be part of the same document. And you will be using a hash sign before the reference URL if something is contained. So if something is starting with hash, this means Fire will understand that this is the contained resource. The information of this is available in the same e-object. If you are not using the hash, then it will search it in the repository. It is assuming that that information should already have been available. So this point you need to take care. And this is the thing we are doing actually. If you see for NHA, we are doing exactly the same thing. So we are defining the patient and then we are defining all the identifiers within that. All the fields within that. So you are doing one more level, above that, you are mapping it with the MDDS and you are mapping it with the MDDS value set. So this is the thing we are doing. Yeah, so these are the different standard profiles available. Now our NHA profile will also come in the same format. So we generally use the word profile. So for NHA, we are developing one profile. Maybe for health information exchange, Ministry of Health may ask us to develop another profile. So there can be different profile representations depending on the requirement. So I think most of the thing I've covered. One small thing is left is So basically, this is the thing, you know, we were discussing, like code system versus value set. So value sets can be different partitions of the code system, or like code directory, for example. So if you have one example like days of week, now days of week can be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. But you can have different value sets getting out of that. So one value set is like all the working days. So working days will only have something from Monday to Friday, for example. Or another value set can be weekend days, so on and so forth. So you can have different value sets getting from the same code system. And this is the exactly exercise we need to do for NHA. So for example, you can have the complete SNOMED as a code system, but you may need only specific codes required for NHA requirements. Now this is a very elaborated exercise. It's not an easy thing. You need to identify only the relevant set of codes which should be coming there, and these are constrained as the value sets. So value sets and code directories need to be modeled. So that is why, you know, I use the word namespace here, and we need one value set version for NHA for all the payer space, and another value set version for all the provider space, which will be controlled by Ministry of Health. And it may not require, you know, all the 3 lakh terms from the SNOMED or all the 75,000 codes from the ICD-10. So let me tell you, there are some very funny codes also in the ICD-10. Z63.1, it is primarily related to, this is one ICD code, which is for all the relationship problems with the in-laws. Now, will you imagine? I mean, in India, do we need that? If I have a relationship problem with my in-laws, that is also coded as Z63.1. So basically, this is irrelevant. So one way is we can load everything and tell that, okay, this is a complete ICD-10. The other thing is we kind of need only the specific things. But this can be done only with a joint exercise with IRDA, NHA, everyone. They will tell like what are the relevant codes required. And only those codes will be published in the value sets. And these value sets need to be published in the code terminology server, along with all the rest of the terminology bindings. Any questions?
So just if you can share the links from where we should study about this.
So I will share this PPT and the other links. Don't worry. You read it. You have any doubts, then we will discuss it again. I know this is a little technical, but you are doing some work, some sort of way already.
Yes, sir.
So it's kind of a more formal discussion around it.
Yes.
So it's nothing new. You're already working on MDDS mapping, FHIR mapping, those things.
Yes, sir.
So I will show you. So that's all from my side. Anything else you want to discuss? Or yeah. Thank you so much.